Hello, and welcome to the first in our series of Photoshop tutorials. We'll be starting today by showing you how to create a new document in Photoshop. To get started, open your Photoshop program. From there, you can easily begin creating a new document by using the drop-down window under File. Click on File to see the drop-down window. After that, the first command you see in the drop-down window is New. Click on New to start creating a new document in Photoshop. Once the new document window opens up, specify what name you want to give the document and change the settings as you see fit. You can change the width, height, resolution, color mode, and more. These will change the size of the document and what you'll have to work with. Once you've done that, you'll be ready to start creating your new Photoshop image. Now you can start putting to digital paper anything in your imagination. Welcome to our first and a more advanced series of Photoshop tutorials. Here we'll talk about some interesting settings and techniques that will get you more acquainted with Photoshop in general. Let's talk about curves. Curves is a setting in Photoshop that allows you to get richer tones and colors in your pictures. To start, we've opened up our usual coffee image here, and we'll click on the Image drop-down, then Adjustments, then Curves. You can also hit Ctrl+M at the same time. Doing this will open the Curves window, which looks like a neat graph chart. In the middle, you should be seeing a line going from the bottom left to the top right. If you want to apply a quick preset which will set the settings for you, you can click the drop-down and change from the default to other settings in the list. Setting the color preset to color negative changes some things here which we'll explain. As you can see, the individual values on the chart have changed. The original black line is still the same, but each individual color has changed. This is a permanent way to change the values of the image. But if we wanted to make it something a little less permanent and tweak the settings as we edit our image, we can make a new layer by going to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then Curves. This will allow us to have our own layer that we can edit the properties of in the Properties window. So over here in our Properties window, you can see that we can edit our curves just like the image edit we were doing before, but it is not permanent as we can hide or unhide the layer using the I button next to the layer. So the main thing to take away from curves is reading the histogram and placing points. We can place points on the histogram so we can change the color changes anywhere in the image, based on the dark spots or the lighter spots of the image. As you can see on our image, the shadows and highlights of our image aren't very great, so we can edit our colors without much interference. So if we put one point in the middle, one point on the end, and one point on the beginning, we can change the colors and alter them in subtle or more advanced ways. Curves help out many Photoshop users with images that have bad contrast or bad lighting. Use curves next time you have an image that needs tweaking. It's one of the most powerful tools in Photoshop's arsenal. Welcome to our second tutorial in our advanced line of Photoshop tutorials. This time we'll talk about some features that are similar to curves, but do things in a more individual way. Brightness, contrast, and exposure. Just like before, we'll start out with our image available. As before, we could alter the image from the Image drop-down and brightness and contrast under the Adjustments, but we'll create a new layer using Layer, New Adjustment Layer, then Brightness and Contrast. That way we can adjust without permanently changing the image. Once in the adjustment layer, we can see that we have a brightness slider and a contrast slider. Tweak your image using these settings. Left is less brightness, making it darker. Right is more, making it lighter. Negative contrast washes out the colors, while positive contrast makes the colors stand out more, but it can make the shadows too dark. Next, we'll add an exposure layer. Go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, then Exposure Layer. Doing this, you can see we have more sliders here. The exposure slider going from negative to positive can darken and lighten the image much like the previous layers. Offset itself changes the absolute light and darkness in the image, so treat that option with care. Gamma correction allows you to add and subtract gamma, general lighting, to the entire image. It starts out at 1, and going left adds more gamma, while going right subtracts gamma. Using all these options allows you to tweak the image as you see fit, so you can make best use of lighting to get the image you want right for your projects. Hello, and welcome to the second in our tutorials in Photoshop. This time, we'll start by showing off some of the most common Photoshop selection tools. First, make sure you have your Photoshop open and a document ready. As you can see, we've got our document ready and can now select anything on the image. Selection tools help you pick and choose what you want out of the image you're currently editing. We'll start by using the rectangular selection tool you'll see here. By selecting the rectangular selection tool, you can click and drag a selection of any size you want on your image. This will allow you to select exactly what you want from the image, albeit in a rectangle or a square. This is the most common form of selection in an image. From there, we can switch the selection tool by going over to the rectangle selection tool, right-click on it, and see a drop-down box of other selection tools. We'll switch to the elliptical marquee tool, which allows us to select things on the image not in a rectangular pattern, but in an oval or circle pattern. Once you've selected something with these tools, you might be ready for a little more advanced selection tool, which will allow you to select things in a creative way, the lasso tool. The lasso tool is more interesting than the previous tools because it allows you to select things in a more controlled manner. Your precise movement of the mouse while holding down the left mouse button will allow you to draw out a selection of your choice. As you can see, the tool allows us to create our own selection exactly this way, but it can be very messy if you don't have practice with it. The final selection tool we'll talk about that is common in use is the magic wand. The magic wand is a tool that allows Photoshop to think about what you're trying to select and select them as you click on the parts of the image with the tool. Observe. As you can see, the magic wand has allowed us to select only part of this image, not all of it. It would take many more clicks to get this image the way we wanted, so it may be time-consuming. And that's it for the common selection tools and their uses. Welcome to the third advanced tutorial in our Photoshop series. We'll be talking about the hue and saturation layer, which works similar to our other layer and adjustment tutorials. Here I have my own image open from before. To set up a hue and saturation layer, just like before, we'll go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer. Then put a new hue and saturation layer down on top of the original image. So with hue and saturation, we can see that we can adjust the layer's colors, hue. The saturation, how deep the colors are, or how light they are, to grayscale, or lightness. How dark or light in general the image is. In an image, you can make the colors much more vibrant by sliding the saturation more to the right than usual. Here we can see our copy image stand out much more visually. And if we change the hue towards more of a red spectrum, we can get the copy image to be very strong in color indeed. Use the lightness slider to make sure that things aren't too bright, as extremely vibrant color can be akin to looking into the sun for some viewers of your images. That's all for this tutorial, as you can change images you see fit to make them pop. Welcome to the third tutorial in our Photoshop series. Before we move on to other topics, let's talk about some of the file types and modes that you will be using to save various files that Photoshop can do. Photoshop can save many different file types, and each one can have a different use in other projects. The default file type that Photoshop wants to use is a PSD file. If you see here, I have saved my previous file that I had opened into a PSD file after we have selected parts of it. A Photoshop data file will allow you to have layers which are editable and a lot easier to manage. Moving on from there, we can see that the document that I have open next is a JPEG file. What happened to the checkerboard background? That was the transparency of my previous image, which a JPEG does not support. What if we want to have an image that's not a PSD, not a JPEG, but supports transparency? The file format that can do that is called a PNG. A PNG image allows the transparent data from the PSD to be saved and used, so you can have interesting images and projects that look professional instead of blocky white backgrounds. Next, there's a file format that you might come across that Photoshop can use. It's called the PDF. A PDF, or portable document format, is usually used on readers like Acrobat Reader. With Photoshop, you can open it, however. It will ask you to import the file instead of just reading it normally. The import window here is kind of similar as a new document file. Here I will change the resolution so that the image that we have will show up smaller than before, as I need to use it for other projects that require a smaller image. These are just a few of the image file formats you will use in Photoshop, and of course, you can save any of these formats into another format if you need to, which will allow you to fulfill many different needs for your future projects. Hello, and welcome to the fourth tutorial in our Photoshop series. In this tutorial, we'll talk about how to crop and resize images, as well as explain what resolution is and how you can get it to work for you. Let's get started. With a Photoshop document open, you can see that I have the image ready to be manipulated. What we'll do today is show off how to crop parts of the image if you need some bits of it for your projects. To crop, click on the crop image icon on the left here. This is actually one of two ways we can crop the image as well, and I'll show the second in a moment. After you click it, like before, drag a selection out of what you want to crop the image to. Cropping the image means you select those parts of the image and only those parts. When you're ready, right-click and select Crop. The second way we can crop the image is to go back, select an area with the Selection tool, and click Crop from the Image drop-down menu. Next, we'll go over how to resize an image. Resizing is a great way to get an image into a smaller or larger specified size for a client on a job or a project you're working on. First, have your image ready, then click the Image drop-down menu. Click Image Size. From there, you can see we have a menu similar to our initial New Document window, where you can change the size of the image. If the little link icon is there, this means that the image will keep its ratio as you change the size. Change the size to whatever you wish, and it will do it for you after you press OK. Need something at 800 width? It'll change the size of the image to fit that width and change the height accordingly. Lastly, I'll talk about resolution. As you can see here on the Image Size Properties window, you can see here that the resolution is 72 pixels per inch. That means the image itself will not be very large. If we change it to something like 300 pixels per inch, the image will be very large, and this is a good way to get your image to scale up quickly for banners, or scale it down so that you can fit it inside a smaller file size. Welcome to our fourth tutorial in our advanced series. This time, we're going to go with a more exercise-focused approach to help you get more acquainted with what a client wants and needs for their projects. Today's exercise, creating web banner ads for a client. There are many sizes that a client needs for their projects, and when doing web banner ads, you may need to do all or some of them. We'll go over the industry standards so that way you can make the banners needed for your projects. The first size we'll go over is the large leaderboard. It's 970 by 90 pixels. To start, we'll create a new image, and then we'll set the width to 970 and the height to 90. That'll give us the dimensions of the image that we want. We'll create a simple white background here. Then apply a quick text add. Make sure your text is in black so it shows up on the background. Write 10 apples for $3.99. To center the text on the banner, go to Select All, then hit the Center Layer option just below the main menu here. From there, add an image of an apple. Here I've added a quick image of an apple I found on the net to both sides of the banner to give it more of a friendly look. And if we were to be finished here, this would be the first type of ad we would have to create for our client. Next, let's create a half-page ad, which is a 300 pixel by 600 pixel version. First, save our image as a PSD. Now, change our image to a 300 by 600 canvas. Go to Image, Canvas Size, and change the inches drop-down to pixels. Here, type in 300 width, 600 height. You'll notice our apples and text is now strangely off screen, and our background isn't fully white. We'll fix all of that and show you how to continue to make other sizes of ads. If you notice, the apple images aren't exactly gone. They're just off screen to the image's canvas. Let's bring those apples back to the top and bottoms of our image now. Then, let's use the paint bucket icon on the left and fill in our white background again. Remember to click the correct layer, which should be the first layer in your order. If it helps, name your layers so that you can remember which is which. Now that we have our white background again, what about our text? For that, let us change the spacing by pressing Enter on certain parts of the text. Here at Apples should do it. Move the text onto the canvas. And resize the text as necessary. For vertical text, I like to use centered text under the Paragraph tab of the font properties for a more pleasing aesthetic. And there you have it. We have a new ad that can save as a separate PNG or JPEG from our original Apple ad. From here, we can create all the rest of the industry standard ad sizes: 160 by 600, 120 by 600, 336 by 280, 300 by 250, 728 by 90, 468 by 60, 200 by 200, and 250 by 250. See if you can make Apple ads for each one of them. For our next project design tutorial, we'll work on creating some great YouTube channel art for yourself or for any clients using Photoshop. Let's get started with the correct size for YouTube channel art. Open a new file, and then set the width to 2560 and the height to 1440. As you start off here, you can see there's a lot of space for you to create some good channel art. What I recommend here is starting out with the theme of your channel or your clients. Is it a science channel? Is it a space theme? You'll need a good background here to show off the tone and mood of the channel in question. Let's assume space is the theme here. I've gone and grabbed a freebie space background here and imported it into the image. With this, we can have a nice canvas of art to build the YouTube's mood and image from. Our imaginary space YouTube is called Deep Cosmos, so let's create a great text effect to show off the name of the channel. First, create your text. Make it large enough to be visible. Then set the color by clicking the color part of the properties window and clicking a part of the image. Then we'll go into the layer blending option, give it a stroke, then click an inner glow effect. I've also used a different font here to give more of a unique look here. The type of font is up to you. I also recommend stacking the text on the right, so the rest of the art can breathe and show off the theme for the channel. Add more text in a readable font, probably not cursive, for what the channel is used for, space exploration. Any extra social media links. I'd not use any more than 2 fonts on your images as well, as it is a design error to use too many different fonts. And this will create a very basic YouTube channel art that will evoke a great wonder about what the channel is based around, and draw viewers in with its great visual design. Welcome to the 5th in our tutorial series on Photoshop. Here we'll be talking about how to work with layers on our Photoshop document. What are layers? Simply put, layers are the way how we can organize our image easily and smartly. Our Photoshop document open, we can see that we already have one layer of the document already in place. Over here on the right is our layer setup, and you can see how many layers we have. 1. The hierarchy of layers, meaning how they are stacked in a certain way, and if they're grouped, which they are not. So, to create a new layer, all you have to do is click the button at the bottom of the layer window that looks like a new page being turned, or hit Shift-Control-N at the same time. You can also click the layer drop-down in the top and select New Layer from there. I personally like the Layer button as it's easy to click and go. After this, you can see that we've added a second layer that is blank to our layer list. The new layer has now become the top layer, which is what will display over the image we have already. In this way, you can draw or stack images so you get exactly what you want out of the document. So, for example, you can see that I can drag the layers and reorder them any way I want. Top, bottom, stack them how you like to make the image you want. It's that simple. To group layers, you can click on the little folder icon down at the bottom next to the new layer icon, and it will create a folder. You can name the folder and drag any layers you want inside the folder. Doing this will allow you to do many interesting things, including apply effects to the entire group and more. And that's all you need to know about the basics of layers, a simple system to make image creation and manipulation easy. Well, hello there. It's the 6th tutorial on how to use Photoshop, and the topic this time is layer blending modes. After our last tutorial where we showed you how layers work, it's time to show you what you can do to your layers. We've already got our handy Photoshop document open, and it's easy to see the layers we've got set up from the previous tutorial. What we're going to do now is show off how you can create neat effects on the layers so you can create stunning documents. What we call effects on layers is called layer blending. Layer blending is a way we can add effects that will create a stronger image, change how the image looks, and more. Right-click a layer over here and click on Blending Options. Once you do this, you can see a wealth of options here to add effects to your layer. One option that is quite popular, especially with text, is the stroke option. The stroke option allows you to create an extra highlight of color around the object in your layer. Doing this can create a nice border effect to make objects stand out. The next option that can have a great effect on your image, and one you will get used to quickly, is drop shadow. Drop shadow makes your object look like it's floating above whatever you have it over in your layer order. You can adjust the direction of the shadow, the opacity, and much more. My last option that I'll go over is the color overlay, an option to completely black out or color out an image to create silhouettes, remove features, and more. The color overlay can allow you to create some interesting backdrops for your future images. There are more options in the layer blending menu, and I encourage you to check them out and see what works best with your images. In our next project design tutorial, we'll go over how to make a Facebook ad. Facebook ads are similar to the industry standard ad designs, so we'll go over the basics really quick and then design an ad in a standard size. Single ads are the easiest type to do, as the other options Facebook gives you for ads are multiple image ads, video ads, and a few more. As before, we want to open a new image with the correct size. The standard Facebook ad size is 1200 pixels by 618 pixels. Let's open an image with this size now. From here, we'll create an image that really pops for our audience. Let's say we're creating an image for a seafood company. Let's go grab an image of some great lobster dinner. On top of that, you want to make the image have something that stands out for your audience. So adding some text that implies the dinner is irreplaceable or you can't find it anywhere else is to create that type of rarity that clients want their products to have. This is not necessarily true of every ad you make, but a nice quip or message about the product you're advertising will help with the ad. We'll add that in, and then we'll touch up the image by adding a quick inner glow filter, and adding more of a vignette look by adding a dark glow, but only around the inside edges of the image. After that, you're done and ready to continue making more ads for Facebook pages. These are the ads you typically will see in Facebook feeds. In this project design tutorial, we'll go over how to make a Facebook cover page. Facebook cover pages are similar to our YouTube cover pages in that you can make them as expressive as you or the client wants. As before, we want to open a new image with the correct size. The standard Facebook cover size is 851 pixels by 315 pixels. Let's open an image with this size now. From here, we'll do as we did before and create something a little more exciting like our YouTube cover image. Let's make this one about science and grab a picture of a laboratory background. Make sure if you use images, you get them from approved sources. No one wants to use copyrighted images in someone else's project. Here we'll add some text, as well as maybe some other social media URLs in our image to give the impression that the page is outside of Facebook as well. Once you've got the look right, it's just as simple as a YouTube cover page. One more thing, if you want to get the ratios right for mobile, make an image that is 640 pixels wide by 360 pixels tall. After that, it's really easy to make more cover pages as you see fit, as well as make sure to save everything as a PSD, so you can edit the cover page in case there's errors. Facebook also accepts PNGs for cover pages, so don't worry about compatibility too much. Welcome to our 7th tutorial in Photoshop. This time we'll focus on the text tool, one of the most used and favorite tool by typographers all over the world. Start by clicking on the T icon on the left. As you can see, I pretty much can type anything I want in my text font picked from the side here. I can select bold, italics, underline, and more. Things like all caps, small caps, stuff like that. Of course, make sure your text is showing up in the correct color that you need for your image. Here, I've selected to make sure that it stands out from the image. Also, as you learned from before, text occupies its own layer, and if you need to select the text quickly, you can hold Control and click on the T icon on the layer as well to select all the text that you've written out. From there, you can change some other settings on other pages of the text panel, including paragraph settings, layout, and more. One last thing, you can click and drag a selection area of where text will go exclusively into. Text has a lot more functions that you can use with it, including vertical, if you so choose. So have fun! The eighth in our tutorial series in Photoshop, let's go over how to create a great glowing text effect and build on our previous tutorial of the text tool. Here we have our text. To create a great look for our text and have it stand out on our image, let's go into the layer blending modes. You might remember these modes from a previous tutorial. Right-click the text layer and select Blending Options. To create a great glowing effect, let's start by giving the text a great outer glow by starting with Outer Glow. Checkmark this option and you can see the options window for the blending mode. Change the opacity how you like it, and you can also change the spread and the size of the glow. Do this as you see fit. Make sure your glow isn't the same as your text, otherwise it'll get lost in the text itself. From there, we'll make an inner glow now to set it apart from the outer glow. Click Inner Glow. This will set the blend mode to screen, but change it to normal so we can see the glow effect on the text. Set the color to blue, then set the size of the glow until you can see it make the text sort of cloudy. That will give us the effect we're looking for. After this, you can apply a drop shadow if you like, or use the gradient overlay to get even more finer control over the text's colors. Doing this will make your text stand out more than usual, and of course, tweak it how you like it or how any client or product needs. Have fun! One of the best ways to make a stunning image that allows the viewer to get the message and the image tied together in a beautiful way are quote images. These are the type of images that you see with words overlaid or cut out of the image to make it look more like art than just text on an image. To show you how to create this image that I have here, let's start with a generic background so we can make something stand out. I went and I found a picture of a pile of leaves. This will be our base that we'll use to create the image. The words that we create will go into the leaves to look like they're coming out of the leaves. To start, I'll write the words life. It's never too late to jump in over the leaves itself. Doing so creates the usual text over image effect, which is fine on its own, but we want to make the words look as if they're underneath the leaves or coming out of the leaves. To do this, let's create another background layer copy on top of the text. And we can drag the opacity down enough so that we can see the words behind it. Doing this will allow us to see what leaves overlap onto the letters, and we'll begin extracting the letters using the Quick Selection tool. We'll do this so it has some of the leaves on top to make the letters look good and buried. This is the most time-consuming process of this effect, as again, you want to make it look like the leaves are laying on top, so take your time to get the leaves to look good. Next, you'll want to create a layer mask after you've selected your leaves on your background layer copy. Click the new Layer Mask button. Change the opacity back to 100%. Next, you'll want to add a drop shadow to your top background layer, so the leaves create a kind of 3D effect on your letters. The last effect we'll make here that makes the letters look like they were placed there instead of just added to the image is a texture that looks like rough paper or stone. Do this through the Pattern Overlay effect. Change the opacity just down to about 20%. This will allow the text to look like it was placed into the leaves instead of our viewer thinking we added them manually. And that's it for this effect. It's a simple one that really makes some images pop and gets some great views. Here's a more advanced tutorial in our ninth in the series on Photoshop. We'll be making a gold text effect that makes it look as if our text was dipped in gold. Start out by having text ready in your image. Here we have our text from the last tutorial with all the layer blending options removed to start fresh. To start creating this effect, let's start by opening the layer options once more. The first thing we want to do is make the text look like it's carved out. Use bevel and emboss here for that. As you can see, our text now looks like it has a curve to it or a 3D look. Let's change that look by clicking on Gloss Contours drop-down menu and click the ring contour. If you're unsure of which is which, just hover over each contour for a few seconds to get the name of the contour. After this, make sure the effect is set to chisel hard, so that way it looks like it was really made out of some sort of marble or stone. As we're going for the gold effect, we're going to add a gradient overlay to the whole image so we can get the gold coloring right. If it's not already, we'll set the gradient to the first gradient setting, foreground to background, by clicking the gradient drop-down menu. Then, click the gradient itself to open the color picking menu. We'll set the colors here by double-clicking the color spots here on the bottom of each gradient to something yellow and brown so that it looks gold. After that, you can see your text is now worth its weight in gold, if only in Photoshop. This blending technique can be used on other things as well, but text is one of the best uses for it. A quick drop shadow at the end makes it stand out even more, and that's it for this effect. Simple, yet effective. Welcome to our next introductory tutorial for Photoshop. Today's topic is about the healing brush and the spot healing brush. We'll be using it to show you how you can touch up blemishes on a photo. This is great for touching up photos of friends, family, and other things you need to make look good. We'll start by taking a photo of someone having blemishes on their face and opening it in Photoshop. Doing this will allow us to have something to work with to show off the healing brush. If we select the healing brush here on the left, with the nice bandage icon on it, you can see that we have options up at the top. Sampled is what you normally want to use for your restoration of your faces and such in your blemished images. Using this, we'll hold the Alt key and click on a spot we want to use as a basis for healing the image. Once we've done that, we'll heal a spot here, and you can see that the brush has figured out what to use nearby to make the healing effect of the brush take place. If we continue, we can remove all the blemishes, and it's a pretty amazing tool. Another way we can do this is, of course, with our spot healing brush, which will do something akin to the selection tool and automatically come up with what you want to heal. At the top are our options. We can do proximity match, which will use what's around the spot you want to heal to fix, create texture, which will create a mix of textures from around the image and is generally not good for face touch-ups. Content aware will try to guess based on what's on the layer itself and what seems appropriate here. Proximity match is actually one of the best options, and you'll see that it tries to fit the fixes in where it can. So be careful with your healing, and have fun making faces and other things look great. Smart filters are one of the most powerful features of Photoshop. We'll start this tutorial by showing you how we can make a smart object, add a filter to the image without it being permanent, and show you the power of smart filters that way. We'll start by opening this image of flowers here, and you can see that we have a great setup of a butterfly and some flowers. What we want to do is convert this image into a smart object, and all we have to do is right-click on the image, and then click Convert to Smart Object. Doing that will set us up for any filters we want to add to this image, and it can be quite addicting to add filters and mess with the image. So let's try to isolate the butterfly here from the rest of the image. What we want to do is go ahead and go to Filter, then to go to Texture, and then Stained Glass. We'll fix the stained glass texture so that it looks smaller and looks good. We can see our butterfly in the back there. Next, we'll draw a nice quick selection around the butterfly. This is what we want to remain, and the rest stay in the stained glass filter. Last, we'll press Ctrl-I, which will put all the selection in black and allow us to see the butterfly. From there, We can tighten the mask around the butterfly so it looks like it's floating above the stained glass. And that's just the basics with what you can do with smart filters. Easy, simple to use, and you don't have to worry about them permanently editing the image this way. This next tutorial will go over the basics of how to create a great image dispersion effect. This effect is great because it looks like the image is being torn apart, but in a way that looks realistic and graphically amazing. Let's learn how to do this together. I've opened up an image of a man here. First, I'll start by creating a duplicate layer of the man in the background. Then I'll lasso over the man in the background layer. Right-click, and then do Fill. Make sure it's set to Content Aware, and it will let you fill in the background over the original man in the picture. We'll then select the entire model by using the Quick Selection tool. From here, depending on your Photoshop client, you can use Refine Edge or Select and Mask and give more of a refined edge to the hair on the model, so we can pick up individual hairs and outlines. Before clicking OK on the Refine Edge, let's output the selection to a layer mask. Now you can see the model is on a separate background. Let's duplicate the layer now. Then apply the mask we made from the previous layer. I'll rename this layer to the Dispersion Effect. Then I'll make a duplicate of this layer and rename it to Man. Now I'll select the Dispersion layer, then select Filter, then Liquify. Next, I'll warp the model using the Forward Warp tool so we can make sure we can have a nice canvas for our effect later. This will determine the size of the dispersion effect. Take your time with the liquify, then when you think you're done, hit OK. Now we'll make another mask, which we'll do by hitting Alt before clicking the New Mask button, the little circle and a rectangle, so we fill the mask with black. This way, our dispersion effect is hidden until we need it. Before we continue, make the original background layer with our picture of our man hidden, so we can edit effects in. Now on our layer called Man, we'll make a new mask with no black filled in, so just click the New Mask button without holding any keys down. Once we've done that, make sure you're on the Man layer's mask. Make sure your brush is set to black for the foreground color. Select the Brush tool, then select a brush that will give a great dispersion effect. There are brushes out there for free that you can download that will give you the effect desired, so look for them. We'll edit the image to give a bit of a destroyed look. Then we'll switch to the dispersion layer and its mask as well. Switch the color to white, and start masking in, uncovering, the warped layer we did earlier. This will give you the effect of a dispersion going onto the image and looks really great. Experiment with this feature. It will allow you to create some really interesting images. Welcome back to our next tutorial in Photoshop, where we'll go over how to do a double exposure effect. A double exposure effect is how we'll blend two images together to make an interesting art project pop. Perhaps your client or project will want you to create some striking images here, and doing so through Photoshop, you will definitely wow the viewer of this image. Starting out, let's pick two images that we want to blend together. Here I'll blend an image of a beach ball with an orange. The idea of playing volleyball with a giant orange is pretty hilarious, don't you think? To start blending these two images together, I'll take the image of the orange, use the Quick Selection tool, and select the whole orange. Once I'll do that, I'll copy the orange selection into the image of the volleyball. As you can see here, the orange is way too large to be able to be blended with the volleyball. I'll need to scale the orange down to size. To do this, we'll need to make a copy of the volleyball layer to start off with. Drag the layer and make sure it's the top layer over the orange. Set the opacity to about 50%. Then we'll shrink the orange to about the same size of the volleyball. Do this by clicking the link icon up near the width and height. This way, with the opacity, we can see exactly what size we need the orange at. Apply the transformation when done. Next, we'll create a layer mask by clicking on the orange. Control-click the image to select all. Then move to the volleyball layer and click the New Mask button at the bottom. Once we have that mask, we'll make a copy of the orange layer and then make a black mask of that layer by holding the Alt key and clicking New Mask. Using the Quick Selection tool, we can select the parts of the volleyball we want to erase. Once we've gotten the image the way we want, you can see that it has this great dual blend effect of having a volleyball that looks like a huge orange. Make sure to leave on the background for the largest effect of showing off the volleyball orange in the scene. Now you know how to use layer masks to blend two images together. Welcome to the next tutorial in our Photoshop series. We'll be doing this tutorial about a great neon text effect for your text. It's a simple effect that will make it really fun to add text to your images of brick walls, or nighttime building photos, and more. First, we'll start out with a brick wall image. Any brick wall image will do, as we will put our text over it and make it glow. Let's add some text now to the image and write neon, probably in a cursive font of some kind. Make sure the font size is large enough to fit into the middle of the image. Next, we'll add a hue and saturation layer to the image, so select the background layer, then go to Layer, click New Adjustment Layer, and then Hue and Saturation. Set the saturation to pretty low, and the lightness as well, but not too dark. We want it to be bright enough that we can see the brick wall. Next, create a new layer which we'll call Clouds. You could do this, of course, by clicking the New Layer button at the bottom, which looks like a new page. Here we'll add clouds to the layer by clicking Filter, then Render, then Clouds. Create a black layer mask on that cloud layer by Alt-clicking the New Layer Mask button. Make sure your clouds layer is set to divide on the layer mode here. Let's use our brush tool here to uncover some clouds. Set the foreground color to white. Make sure the layer mask is selected. And set the opacity of our brush to about 50%. Make sure your brush hardness is also 0% as well. Once that's done, uncover some clouds behind the neon word. Next, we'll start working on our text. Make sure to change the font of the text to something blue if it isn't already, and go into the layer blending modes. We'll add a bevel and emboss effect to the text, making sure the style is inner bevel, the technique is smooth, the depth 185, the direction up, the size 3, and the soften 16. We'll also add an inner shadow effect, where the blend mode is multiply, the opacity 40%, the distance 5, the choke 0, and the size 5. Then we'll add an inner glow effect where the mode is screen, the opacity 75, the noise 0, the choke 0, and the size 8. Make sure to make the technique here source center. Then hit OK. Create a duplicate layer of that text. Put it below the top layer of text, then convert it to a smart object. Add a Gaussian filter using the Filter dropdown, Blur, then Gaussian Blur. Set the radius to about 11 pixels. Now we'll create the wire that the neon sign is connected to the wall by creating a new layer above the clouds layer. Set your brush first to one with a full hardness, then about 13 pixels in width. Use the pen tool here on the layer and click and drag out a line across the layers here in a curvy wave. Right-click on the line and click Stroke Path. Make sure the Simulate Pressure option is turned on. Right-click the path, then click Delete Path. We'll add a blending layer effect to the line, bevel and emboss. Make sure that the depth is 245, size 0, and soften 3. Lastly, we'll add a more soft blue glow to the clouds in another layer. Add another layer on top of this layer, then switch to a soft brush with no hardness, with the size close to the size of our letters. Set the opacity to about 63%. Brush in some blue. Set the layer blending to soft light. And there you have it. Our neon sign is complete. Welcome to our next Photoshop tutorial. This time we'll be doing a great fire text effect. This can create a great illusion of text that looks like it's either made of fire or on fire. We've already started with a great fire effect image we'll use later in the tutorial. We'll proceed by opening a new file, making the height 1280 and the width 720. Change the background to black by using the Paint Bucket tool, and make sure the foreground color is black. Use the Text tool next, and a great tall font. I'll type the word fire here so we can see the effect on it later. Let's go to the blending options on our layer and add an outer glow. Change the color in the box here to F70300, then hit OK. Select the satin blending next and change that color to 872D0F, and hit OK as well. Change the opacity on the satin effect to 100%. Change the distance to 10 pixels, then hit OK. Now select Inner Glow. Change the blend mode to color dodge here. Next, change the color to E5C23B, then hit OK. Change the opacity to 100%, the size to 10 pixels, then hit OK. Now we're done with our text, so hit right-click on the text layer and rasterize our type. Now we're going to fade out the top of our fire text. So use the eraser tool and set the brush to 250 pixels with 0 hardness. Erase some of the text as you see here. Now we'll go up to Filter, Distort, then zigzag. Set the amount to 4 and the ridges to 4. Make sure the style is set to pond ripples and hit OK. Now we'll select our fire image we've opened and copy that into our text image we're working on. Position the fire image over our text, then we'll switch over to the Channels tab here next to our layers. Hold Ctrl and click the green layer to load a selection of the areas of fire in our image. Head back to the Layers tab, then press Ctrl J to make a copy of the selection we got from the Channels tab. Delete our original fire layer. Here I'll rename the layer Fire Main to stay organized. We'll move the fire around to wherever we like in the image. From here, we'll resize the image to fit over our text, then duplicate the layers so we can make more fire effect on our text. Be sure to resize, rotate, and erase edges of the fire around the text so it looks like the text is on fire realistically. And that's how you do this effect. In our next tutorial for Photoshop, let's create a great lens flare effect for our photos. Of course, you could use the lens flare effect in Photoshop, but it usually comes out pretty cheaply made and poorly well done. We'll go make our own effect and have it look great and professional. So we'll take our image of a sunset in the back here and add a new layer to the scene. Then we'll take a brush and make sure the hardness is set to 0, the size to about 300. And then we'll change the color of our brush to white. Next, we'll paint a spot, and then zoom in to the brush effect on our image. We'll add some noise to our effect using Filter, Noise, Add Noise. Use about 3.5% of noise. Make sure it's uniform and monochromatic. And hit OK. The noise is going to prevent the effect from banding if we scale the effect. Now let's duplicate the layer. Through the right-click Duplicate Layer option, or you can use Ctrl J. We'll name the new layer White, and the old layer Orange. Next, we'll add color to the orange layer. Hide the white layer. Then go to Image, Adjustments, then Hue and Saturation. We'll color it by turning on the Colorize option. Move the hue over to a nice orange, and the saturation near 100%. You can make it a little lighter or darker if you'd like. Now we'll set the orange layer to a blend mode of screen. Then we'll set the white layer to a blend of linear dodge add. With the orange layer, we're going to free transform. Draw out our orange layer a bit, making sure that the link is selected to keep the ratio. Commit the changes. We'll select both layers, and we can drag it wherever we want. So let's move them over the sun in the image, and then free transform the effect so it's large and covering the sun. Make sure your two images are centered together. Now we have our lens flare effect. If you want to make sure that you don't want to wash out the color in the image, go to the orange layer, set it to screen, and then the white layer to linear dodge add. Change the opacity of the orange layer down to 50% or so. With the white layer, we're doing the trick here, which is the fill opacity rather than the actual opacity. Set that to about 15% or 20%. You can play with the opacity and fill layer here, and also do some transforming and stretching the lens flare effect to hit more parts of the photo. This is a very quick and easy way to generate a lens flare that you have full control over the way it looks on your image. Welcome to the next tutorial in our Photoshop series. We're going to go over a way to create a quick lomography effect. And a lomography effect is a type of effect that you might see on Instagram photos or other types of photos that make it look kind of a hipster-like or retro look. Now, it's very easy to create this look. It's actually extremely fast to create this look in Photoshop. All you have to do is open up a photo. You can see, for example, I have a photo right here. You want to go to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and Curves. And we're going to make a new Curves layer here. Now, I'm going to make the Curves layer called the Lomography Effect, which we'll go ahead and type that in. And you can see we've got a nice little layer that goes over our background. It also has its own layer, so that way we won't have to worry about making the effect on the image and not having it affect the image permanently. So the way we start this effect is we go through and check out the curves. So we've got the histogram here, and we want to start out by actually putting a point here and dragging it down a little bit, which you see will actually drag down some of the shadows in the image. And then you want to put a little point up here and drag that one up, which will actually drag in some more of the light into the image. Then we'll go into the red, and we'll actually put a little point there, drag that down a little bit so we can get some more in there. But we actually want to drag the shadows up a little bit so we can get some more darkness depth to the image. We also want to drag up the end here as well and go to the green and do the same thing. Drag up a little bit there, drag down a little bit at the top. And then when we get to the blue, we'll actually do this a little bit different. We actually want to drag up on the previous one, and we actually want to drag down at the top here, which will actually add a lot of different blues to the image there. So if we go back to the original RGB, we can actually pull up the shadows a bit because we want to create that kind of soft tone in the shadows as well. And by doing that, that allows us to create a great lomography effect. It's actually kind of overdone here. It's a little bit too much on the image. So if we go to the opacity, and when you turn the opacity down to maybe about like 50, 55, you can see that it has put itself over the image, and you can see a nice effect on your image that gives it kind of a hipster or retro look. And you can turn on and off the layer to see the difference in the image as we put the Lomo effect on. And that's pretty much it for this tutorial.